40k's new rule set is really quite interesting and a shake-up to the game, but let's talk about a couple of other areas where Games Workshop's rules appear to have failed certain 40k units. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're taking a look at another couple of really quite big areas that Games Workshop just seems to have overlooked a bit in the whole Arks of Omen expansion, and it kind of has some pretty painful implications for the models within them, at least in terms of being game legal in 40k in certain combinations. As we've been talking about on the channel over the last couple of weeks, the whole Arks of Omen update with the new detachments, points and everything else has been a massive shake-up to the 40k rule system, and for the most part I think that Games Workshop has genuinely done a good job of keeping the vast majority of armies and models still very playable within it, even after completely changing up the detachment and allies rules. Despite that though, I do think that there's a bunch of things that just weren't really considered in the new rule set, and particularly the two that we're talking about today are ones that I think that they need to address with FAQs or a rules update of some sort, if they don't want to just relegate a whole load of fairly cool models to the shelf. This video is a bit of a follow-up video to the one that we did a few days back. In that one we just talked about a few 40k rules fails from the Arks of Omen. Those ones were subtly fixed with a stealth update to the Minotaur field manual, Drukhari army construction which has kind of been left high and dry, Leagues of Votan allies which have just been very weirdly implemented, weirdly de-restrictive but then very punishing to the armies that take them, and also kind of half-fixing the Grey Knight's Demon Slayer Warlord trait so it works on some demons but not others. In the comments for that video though, you guys pointed out a couple of other really big areas that I probably should have included in the first video. These ones honestly even more problematic for the units involved. First up is the way that Arks of Omen seems to have taken the hammer to Supreme Commanders, and they've gone from being spectacularly easy units to field within your army to ones that you can't take out of their own sub-factions, or for the ones that can you still probably don't want to. In the standard detachment system before Arks of Omen, the way that they would work is that you'd have your regular detachments, then you'd have a Supreme Command detachment that was completely separate, just including one of these powerful models, say like Abaddon the Despoiler, Rabute Gilliman, or the Silent King. That meant that they were easy to field. In addition, they didn't break detachment rules or force you to go for the Supreme Commander's own sub-faction, say for example like Shadow Sun's Tau Sept, and it also meant that they were a bit easy to field in addition to your HQs as opposed to competing with them. In the Arks of Omen rule set, it's very heavily implied that you just get the Arks of Omen detachment plus or minus one allied detachment of one flavour or another. The core rules actually are kind of nebulous about this and don't explicitly say that you can't take other ones, though it is made a lot more clear in the designer's commentary, and just from the way that the rules are written, it seems completely unlikely that they want you to take more detachments than those two. Still though, that in itself could probably just do with an FAQ to make it completely clear to people. I think it was just left with a bit more ambiguity than it really should have been. In any case though, it does seem to be pretty commonly accepted by the community that Supreme Command detachments have just gone away for this game mode, and that is kind of problematic for them, as it means a fair few Supreme Commanders just can't be taken outside of their own Legion, Dynasty or Sept etc. Otherwise you break the Army Battleforce rules by having multiple different ones in the detachment. Perhaps one of the biggest and most obvious examples is Zarek the Silent King, a very competitive choice for the Necrons. It seems that now he's just plain not allowed to be fielded in any other dynasty besides the Saragon one. That one's the one that allows a bit of mortal wound protection and rerolls, but certainly isn't the most common one that Necrons are generally wanting to take. He does have the Dynastic Agents keyword, but that still doesn't allow him to be taken in a detachment that isn't his own one. Previously it wasn't an issue because he could be fielded in the Supreme Command, but now he can't. The rules seem kind of similar for Shadow Sun and Tau Sept, maybe a bit less of a problem seeing as Tau Sept is perhaps a preferred one for the Tau Empire compared with some, and Abaddon's perhaps a little bit more tricky as he gets the Agent of Chaos keyword. To my understanding it means that you can actually field him outside of Black Legion, but if you do then it doesn't count as another Legion's detachment as it's a mixed one, and that means that the other units will lose a bunch of things from it. In general the upshot is that none of these really ever want to be fielded outside of their own sub-faction, so Abaddon might be going back to Black Legion, and is just completely banned from leading other armies like Chaos Knights like he was before. I think it's probably the biggest impact to armies like Chaos Space Marines and Necrons, as both of their Supreme Commanders are rather good. Shadow Sun's good, but I feel like you could probably just get away with fielding Tau Sept. I feel like this is probably an oversight as opposed to intended by Games Workshop. For the entire rest of the edition, these Supreme Commanders have generally had rules for being fielded alongside other dynasties or legions. They sometimes have better synergy with their own one, like Abaddon giving Black Legion full rerolls, but he can still buff other Chaos Space Marines as well. It does seem to be the intention. I feel like this is probably just an oversight, and they might well address it in an FAQ to the Arks of Omen Grand Tournament pack when it drops. Until then though, it's perhaps bad news for the Silent King in particular. The other major area where the rules and keywords just don't really stack up properly are the Inquisition and the Agents of the Imperium patrol detachment for allies to the Imperium. The rules kind of nearly work, but just about each section of the Agents of the Imperium is sort of broken in its own way, and I feel like Games Workshop probably just needs to reissue the entire thing, which who knows they might do in the near future. In Arks of Omen, if you're playing Imperium, then you get the option to add an Agent to the Imperium allied detachment, either an auxiliary one or a patrol. In general, for all the units contained within, the Agents of the Imperium keyword is generally an exemption that allows them to be fielded alongside other armies without breaking their pure faction special rules, say Sisters Miracle Dice and Space Marine Doctrines. What's more, previously there was the option to include these Imperial Agents units as a single choice within your battalion, patrol, or brigade detachment, but the Arks of Omen doesn't work with that one. It isn't a battalion, patrol, or brigade, so it looks like the only way to field your Imperial Agents now is outside the detachment. You can't say include an Inquisitor within as one of your HQ choices. It means that the allied patrol or auxiliary one actually needs to work. As mentioned though, the rules for it do seem to be broken in a few different ways. Firstly, Games Workshop appear to have declared their Inquisition supplement as completely out of date, the one that was from Warzone Octarius Rising Tide. This comes from Games Workshop's legal supplements document, the one that they used to basically get rid of the Tyrannid Leviathan and Crusher Stampede ones, and a whole bunch of things were declared out of date in January 2023, which has now arrived. Honestly not sure why they didn't allow these things to stay until the end of 9th edition, that would have seemed more logical to me. But it does look like they are going with this, even in their designer commentary around the Arks of Omen release. They did mention in their MetaWatch video that this document will be standing, and it does mean that anything that was marked as out of date is indeed gone. As they haven't actually issued any updated rules for the various Inquisitor datasheets, it does mean that technically they're out of the game at the moment, which definitely won't be the intention long term. They still sell the vast majority of those miniatures, and it kind of means that they're very likely to issue a new update to allow you to use them again at some point. It's just a bit weird that they didn't do that before it went out of date, rather than now it actually has. I say for more casual games and everything, you're good to keep on using Inquisitors. They're hardly as if they're overpowered in any way, but currently under 40k's rules you can't field them, and it does seem a bit of a strange decision on Games Workshop's part. Assassins, weirdly enough, don't have the same problem, despite having their rules in a much older and more out-of-date book in the War of the Spider book back from 8th edition. They're still apparently good till June 2023, though their issue is one of keywords. The problem for them is that, like the Inquisition units, they have the Agent of the Imperium keyword listed on the ones at the bottom of their datasheet, not on their faction keywords, and it's the faction keywords that you need to make a detachment of them. It means that you can't have an assassin as an Agent of the Imperium, auxiliary support, or in a patrol detachment, as it technically doesn't meet the keyword requirements. Obviously for this one I feel like that's being maybe a bit over litigious. It seems pretty obvious that you'd intend to have the assassins with the Agents of the Imperium keyword, which they do have, just in the wrong place. I don't think anyone would say you just can't use them in a casual game because of that, but it still seems that something that Games Workshop should sort out with an FAQ. If you turned up to them to a tournament or something, you wouldn't want to run into someone who's trying to be a bit of a rules lawyer and say that technically that's not allowed and your army is illegal. Finally, for the rogue traders, they got a new datasheet with the kill team that got released, and in general they have the keyword in the right place and things, so seemingly are a bit more on it. Unfortunately for the actual rogue trader datasheet though, they also have a datasheet rule meaning that they can't ever take a mandatory slot in a detachment. It's pretty weird to be honest, as it looks like there's no exception if you've taken it in a full rogue trader type detachment or with the Astra Cartographica keyword. The rule just literally reads that this model cannot be taken in a compulsory battlefield role slot. I believe that would mean that with the Inquisitors being out, that would mean that you'd be very hard pressed to actually field a legal Agents of the Imperium patrol detachment, as the Inquisitors' rules are all technically gone and don't have the keyword in the right place, and the rogue trader can't be used as a mandatory HQ. Overall, I feel like it's a section that just almost works, but everything is just slightly off. It would be good for Games Workshop to do a bit of a focused update on these, and maybe just re-release the Inquisition Index, either through a digital update, or maybe White Dwarf if they can't do that, just to make them playable and actually have these attachment rules working as intended. All this mess isn't really the biggest deal for casual games. To me it's fairly clear how it's supposed to work. It'd be nice if Games Workshop just backed that up with the actual rules as written though. So anyway, let me know what you think. Do you think that Games Workshop will be fixing the Supreme Commanders with an FAQ? And what do you reckon they might do with the Imperial Agents and the Inquisition? By all means, feel free to correct me if I've got any of the technicalities wrong in this. There's quite a lot of layered keywords coming into play here. If I feel like I've got anything too majorly wrong with the video, I'll try and post a pinned comment correction. In any case, if you've enjoyed the discussion, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or I'll certainly try and keep up with Games Workshop's news, rules, and releases. Feel free to check out the original part of the video with the other things that I had a bit of an issue with from Arks of Omen. That one will be linked down in the video description. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and that's how I can keep quite so many videos coming quite so often. The channel's Patreon backers are what allows me the time to spend quite so much time making videos about model soldiers, and if you are enjoying a lot, any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons get a few advantages: seeing certain rules videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.